All right.
Hello, friends. This is Jeffrey Grutner coming to you on this beautiful summer-like evening in early June. Um, I wanted to tell a story tonight that has to do with the energies that are starting to unfold or have been unfolding. And they're at least related to that because I wanted to start by telling a story that especially my friends at the Venus Alchemy can relate to. But I also want to make the story broadly general enough so that all people can have some understanding because it's exciting and interesting. But I have on a t-shirt that relates to this, and this is from the Gila National Forest, which is in New Mexico, southwestern New Mexico. It might be in other parts too, but that's where this all takes place. And I have this magnet. So on this t-shirt, first of all, this is an ancient symbol of the Mimbres people, Mimbres, who were probably relatives to the Anasazi. And they lived in this area of southwestern New Mexico where the story takes place. And the other thing I have here, because it's what this this is what I have to show it, is it's a refrigerator magnet, but it represents another symbol to them that the Mimbres people is very important, and that is a dragonfly. And this is from the Mimbres Cultural Heritage Site. On this t-shirt is this symbol actually has these cranes, and these cranes, they form a kind of a figure eight or a infinity symbol to us. How exactly they interpreted that, I don't know, but it really struck me. So let me back up and give you more setting here. So this took place 8 years ago, and 9 years ago, I joined the then brand new Venus Alchemy group or class. It was initiated by Kaylin Castell, my good friend, and my other friend, Tammy Brunk. And now it's Kaylin and Sheridan who are leading that. It's a class that follows the cycle of Venus in a particular way that really opens up our understanding of the whole cycle of Venus with Sun and Earth, in this very magical way. And it's tied to, for those who don't know, it's tied to the story of Inanna, that Sumerian goddess, queen of heaven and earth, excuse me. And without going into the whole entire thing again, for those who don't know, the story of Inanna, who descends into the underworld and then rises back up again, is actually tied to the Venus cycle very precisely. And when the moon, the crescent moon, conjuncts Venus in the sky as a morning star, she is descending into the underworld. And she spends some time, a longer period of time, with the sun, going through a process of transformation, we would say. And then she rises as an evening star, and with each conjunction of the new moon crescent, she is putting on another one of her vestments until she rises into the night sky as a new queen and expressing a new energy. So she goes through this transformational process about every 19 months, 5 times every 8 years. And with each time, there's an overarching theme of a type of an archetype that Venus is expressing, that's going through a transformational process. So, and all that, of course, relates to the feminine or the energies that are Venus. And I want to make one little quick distinction here because so often these days we've gotten created even more separation with masculine, feminine. Some people even use those words to mean men and women. And those energies exist within all of us. We all have some energy of Venus in us. It's not just women or those who express what we consider feminine type energies. So Venus is a magical being, and this is a magical cycle. So I set that up kind of quickly so that you kind of have a background of what's going on now, but in particular what was going on then. And at each one of those lunar conjunctions with the planet represents a chakra. And as Venus is rising back up as an evening star, which is what it's doing now here in June 2023, it's been an evening star now for several months, and she's putting back together a new form of that chakra in an expression that in this case has to do with a Capricorn goddess for the astrologers. It is like the wise woman, the circle of grandmothers, or all of us again have this kind of energy in us. And it doesn't necessarily mean an elder woman, but it's the wisdom of the elder woman, the feminine energy that guards and takes care of generational consistency, of taking care of the heart, taking care of the transmission of culture from one generation to the next. It's just little snippets. So it's all these mysteries that we can engage with and that are in fact actually unfolding, because even if we're not paying attention to it, it's happening in the sky. We're going about doing our business and whatnot. All these planetary motions, if you don't already know that, they represent archetypes that exist within human beings. And there's a synchronicity between them. So as above, so below, which we've heard, millions of times. But the thing to understand is that these things are taking place and they're happening whether we're paying attention to it or not. So one of the most important things for those who are inclined is to work with it intentionally, not unconsciously, but to try to understand what are these energies telling us as a theme, and how can we engage with them in order to facilitate our own evolution and hopefully the evolution of the culture and the planet, helping us bring about a new and better world. So what the thing that I had mentioned there in terms of the timing was that this 8 years ago would have been the completion, the last time there was a Venus cycle in Capricorn. And when it reached the crown, coming back to achieving the crown once again, and in terms of the chakra, that's your seventh chakra, so a renewing of the feminine expression that is the crown, in the sense of how are we caring for generational wisdom. So Tammy, who was part of that at that time, and Kaylin decided to have a in-person event, because this was the first time they had done this. This is the end of their 19-month cycle at that point. I had started journeying with them as one of the very few men who participated in this. All this was done online, of course, for those who don't know that. But so they started with the Capricorn iteration of the Venus cycle. And when it reached the end, they decided to have this in-person event. There might have been one more, but anyway, it was the crown. And it happened to be over the summer solstice. So here we are 8 years later, and we're, in a sense, there is the repeating of that cycle. A whole new iteration, but it's a repeating of that. And so around solstice time this year, 2023, there is a reflection of that in the solstice time of 2015. So that's the setup. Take a little time, but it was decided to do that at Faywood Hot Springs, which was a very significant place to them and to the shamanic astrology mystery school paradigm that was originated by Daniel Giamario. That was the way that they were functioning. Kaylin was a co-founder of that mystery school and wrote the manual, the book that is part of that. And it's another way, it's a perspective, it's a beautiful way of understanding astrology. I was drawn to it for reasons that there were similar patterns in the work I've been doing for over 30 years in working with it ceremonially and observing the sky and so on. But it's a very specific way of working with it. At any rate, Faywood Hot Springs was very significant. There was a stone circle built there by the school. It's kind of a magical place. Now, the challenge for me was that I was also involved with the many different things I do. I am adopted into the Dakota way of being, the Dakota Lakota way of being, and I walk with a chanupa, a sacred pipe. And so as someone who does that ceremony, I've been doing that for over 35 years. And I had been working with a local choreographer here who created what was she called at that time the Solstice River Dance. And what she does, Mary Lee Hardenberg, is she would create a site-specific choreography, a dance that featured that space and that place as part of the act and how the movement with it expressed it. And it was on the summer solstice, because here in Minneapolis, the way the river is angled at the St. Anthony's Falls, which is where the city originated, was at these falls on the Mississippi River, the sun is angled in the direction that the river is angled at the setting sun lines up with the river. And again, for people who may be watching us who haven't been downtown Minneapolis, there's this beautiful 140-year-old stone bridge that crosses the river. It was originally a railroad bridge. It's now a pedestrian and biking bridge, and it's fantastic. It crosses it in front of the falls. It's spectacular. So Mary Lee created a whole choreographed dance that used that entire space. They had dancers on the buildings, etc., etc. Well, I've also worked with that sacred site, again, for over 30 years, bringing people there, doing ceremonies, teaching them about the spiritual nature and energy of it. And in fact, I'd done some very, very significant work over the Uranus-Neptune conjunctions in '93. However, we came together and understood our love and connection to this place and a kind of stewardship. And while she was bringing attention to the state of water, she also had a spiritual sense to it, but wasn't as open about that, whereas that's my thing. That's what I do. So our collaboration was that I was like the spiritual director of this. And even though I'm not native, I walk in that way. I had cared for this place, and I carried the chanupa. So what I did was I would help to create the spiritual underpinnings of that whole event, uh, and have people bring their offerings. And what I got to do, which was awesome, was I was behind the scenes, but I would have the chanupa, the pipe, do the pipe ceremony at the brink of the falls while this choreography was going on. And it was absolutely amazing and wonderful. I mean, I can't even describe what an amazing experience it was. 3,000 people lined up on that stone bridge, and to connect with them on this soul level, but more importantly, my communication with the spirit of the place, of Mother Earth and that sacred site, the intelligence of nature. And that's really a lot of what this story is about too. And I'm going to get back to Feywood in a minute. But it was very important to me to be a part of that. I was, an important, critical person. And that was called Global. She had taken that original Solstice River dance and turned it into a global thing, global water dances, so that there were choreographers from all over the world performing. But that was kind of the archetype, the beginning of it was there in downtown Minneapolis. So I had to figure out how could I be in two places at once, because I wanted to do both. It was a unique and wonderful apparition, because Venus was also with Jupiter and the moon, and I had gotten to know these folks. Definitely wanted to do this. So I did something crazy. I flew down to Phoenix several days early, and I rented a car, drove the 5 hours, got to Feywood, and kind of sort of set up camp. I didn't really have a tent or anything, but I was there. But what I do when I approach a new place is I connect with the spirit of the land and the spirit of the places. And in particular, I ask permission and invite the indigenous spirits to teach me, as well as whatever, whoever else wants to come and share their wisdom of the nature, the natural world, the natural spirit. So in my explorations in that kind of desert, almost foothill area, because nearby is Silver City and there's mountains there, and but I discovered very quickly that the Mimbres was a culture that really had an imprint there. And as I pointed out in the very beginning of this video, dragonfly motif. There were dragonfly petroglyphs, and that was very significant to them. The other thing that was significant, and this is, it took me a while to learn these things, but I was specifically led there to learn them. The other thing that was significant was that the cranes, sandhill cranes, were a very important medicine bird to them. And furthermore, they did the ceremonies for the going home of the souls. The cranes were thought to carry them home. They did their ceremonies on the solstice, summer solstice, and they honored the cranes. So all of these synchronicities lined up. Here I was, my intention was to stay there, and I had a flight back on the solstice so I could arrive just in time. Fortunately, our water dance was in the evening, so that I could go perform that part. But I got to also be there in Feywood Hot Springs to share in this experience, at least the beginning of it. and to witness they were starting to line up. The moon wasn't exact yet, but the planets were there. It was pretty amazing seeing the stone circle, exploring the area, etc. But I got deep into the spirit of that. These, in particular, the dragonfly and the cranes. And I knew that what I was going to do was to ask people to participate and join us, along with the program and the ceremony that Kaylin and Tammy had set up. I had intended to connect with them across the distance. And so what I did was I asked if that would be okay, first of all, if they would be willing to do that, and they were totally down with that idea. How cool was that? And there happened to be a woman there. I think in her introduction, she said she was a dancer and maybe a choreographer, but a dancer for sure. And she had tattooed on her arm a sandhill crane. So that was perfect. And so I made an offering, and I asked her, I said, would you lead the group in a sandhill, in a dance that honors these ancient peoples, that honors the medicine of the sandhill crane, some kind of movement that whatever comes to you, and to do that in these pools, in the hot spring pools, and that we would honor the dragonflies as well. So the offerings I made to dragonfly, and etc., etc. By the end of that first day of instructions, the dragonflies started to show up. Just a few at first. But what happened that was so amazing, and I kind of wish I was there, but I had to be in two places. First of all, getting back to Minneapolis was quite a deal. I had to leave way early in the morning, drive 5 hours to Phoenix, fly home, somehow with no sleep, get ready and prepped to do this big ceremony. But it was absolutely amazing. They did take a little bit of video, but all the women that were left, they did their dance to the sandhill crane, and the dragonflies showed up with them around the pool, a whole bunch of dragonflies. And we had such an amazing ceremony there at St. Anthony's Falls in the Mississippi. And I can still remember vividly. I wish I had gotten a picture, but in a way the picture's right here. As we were leaving, because the dance takes place, starts really probably about this time. This is it's about 8 o'clock, and it ends with the setting sun, so that everybody can witness the sun setting over the river. And as we drove through downtown Minneapolis, and there's that kind of like Manhattan-henge, the downtown streets and the skyscrapers would line up with a segment of the sky, and we'd pass in front, and there in that beautiful, periwinkle twilight, that twilight blue, was the crescent moon and Venus and Jupiter in this perfect triangle. So it was an amazing kind of high magic event, really an incredible experience. There were some other things. I was actually going to tell something I did before that about some other earth web weaving, but I think I'm going to leave it at that. That this was, let's consider this part one, because that's the story of what happened with Venus Alchemy, at Faywood and here in Minneapolis with Global Water Dance. And that at that time was Venus, in her Inanna story, was achieving her head crown, the new head crown center, this new connection to the divine as the Capricorn goddess. And she was with Jupiter, with the the royal being the philosopher, king, queen of Jupiter. And we're in a time now where Jupiter isn't there this time, but on the solstice, the crescent moon, the new crescent moon, will be with Venus and Mars. It's the Venus and Mars that are going to be together in the sky. And that's going to be part 2 of this story. But for now, thank you for listening. And I hope that gave you maybe some inspiration, at least for my Venus alchemy buddies, that this was a time of true magic. I had hoped that we might be doing another in-person event, and maybe that I would do one on my own for whatever circumstance. But at any way, I will be honoring that time. And the I think just 2 little wrap-ups, which is, it's amazing when we can engage in a ceremonial way how spirit shows up, and it is amazing when we engage in the magic that exists between earth and sky, how it shows up in us, and that the more intentional we are, the more significant it can be for our own transformation and hopefully the transformation of the world. So with that, I'll say Matakia Asana Lapida. Thank you.